Hello, I'm Nate Regier, your host for the Compassionate Accountability Podcast. I'm the founder and CEO of Next Element, a global consulting and training firm helping organizations transform their cultures with compassionate accountability. I'm the author of 4 books about compassionate work, including my new book, Compassionate Accountability: How Leaders Build Connection and Get Results. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you'll implement the tips and tools featured in this show. If you benefit from my podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review to help us reach more listeners. Also, be sure to visit our website at next-element.com, where you can learn about all the work we do, as well as find all our previous podcast episodes. I'm certain that this conversation is going to hit a chord with many listeners. The topic is so relevant. I first heard my guest speak last year at the annual business retreat of the Association of Learning Providers. I was really impressed by his perspective on trust, how he defines, measures, and teaches trust. His framework is practical, relevant, and actionable, and it's so aligned with our compassionate accountability philosophy. I wanted to dive deeper in a podcast conversation. So here we are. Dr. David Horsager is the CEO of Trust Edge Leadership Institute and inventor of the Enterprise Trust Index. He's the director of a global study, The Trust Outlook, a Wall Street Journal best-selling author, and a senior fellow at Indiana Wesleyan University. David has advised leaders and shared his framework with organizations ranging from Delta Airlines, McDonald's, FedEx, and Toyota to New York Yankees, Walmart, Zoom, MIT, and global governments. David asserts that trust is not a soft concept, it's a strategic asset. Leaders who prioritize trust create thriving environments where innovation and collaboration flourish. This fall, David is launching a new book, Trust Matters More Than Ever. So what a great time to connect up with this expert on the topic of trust. David, welcome to the Compassionate Accountability Podcast.
Hey, thanks so much, Nate. Great to be with you.
You know, I remember when we first met, it was at ISA, the Association of Learning Providers, and I heard you speak and was just so impressed and wanted to learn more. And once we got to talk, I think it was in one of the lines for I don't know, a meal or the bar or something, and we got to talking, and you were so gracious to agree to come on to talk about trust, which is a big issue, I think, for a lot of my listeners, definitely for us. So I would be curious, would you share a little bit about how did you get into the field of trust itself? Like, what's your journey to get here?
Wow. You know, Lisa and I started our first business. I'd been director of a youth and family organization for a little while. And then in 1999, Lisa and I started our first business. I'd built some leadership curriculum down there, really think of college students and, senior hires and stuff. And I was doing this content that I'd built, and some companies were interested in it and whatever. And the U.S. Coast Guard Academy, the commanding officer said, we want this there and that kind of thing. I was early, 99, 2000. We started on a shoestring, by the way. We moved back to Minnesota, $1.40 to our name by the time we threw everything we had into this company. We lived in the basement of an older lady's home for, black mold, no windows, bathroom or kitchen. We'd go 3 flights up to share her bathroom in the middle of the night if we had to. So it was pretty crazy. But I said, keep expenses low. And that's where we started this for 2 years. But basically, about not too long after, I was dealing with this company. I was at this conference, and I was I still remember where I was, the Lowe's Resort in Arizona, one of the places. And I just remember being outside thinking, the problem they think they're having is not the real problem. They don't they're not following the leader because they don't trust them. And then I started thinking about a sales issue. I'm like, they're not buying because people don't trust the product or the person. They're not, innovation isn't happening on this team because they don't trust each other, so they won't share ideas. And learning isn't happening in this classroom because they don't, trust the content or the professor or the psychological safety or trust the room. So that was intuitive first, but that's what tipped me to start seeing from this trust. And I think that's a trust issue. Oh, I think that's a trust issue. I actually don't think that's a leadership, a communication, a sales, a whatever issue at the core. I think it's a trust issue. And that led to my grad work And there was very little research at the time on trust in leadership and these kind of spaces. But that's kind of the start was like, I cared about leadership and development and culture and efficiency and productivity. And I started to see it, actually at the core. And I'm more convinced of this than ever. The core issue actually is always a trust issue, and trust is always the leading indicator.
Well, so you just started kind of seeing a pattern and wondering about it. Mm-hmm. And started focusing on it. And later, I want to ask you about your research, because that's something that's been really important to you. You're really committed to that. So you started seeing that maybe trust is what's going on here. Maybe trust is what's going on here. What is it about trust that is so important?
Well, I think depending on who you are, basically it's a leading indicator of everything. So if I want to increase sales, I have to increase trust. If I want to increase referrals, I can't just increase referrals. I have to increase trust. That's what gets more referrals. Engagement actually isn't at the core an engagement problem. If I want more engagement, I have to not get more engagement. I have to increase trust. That gets more engagement. If I want to sell more, let's take a marketing message. If I want to amplify a marketing message, there's only one way. I have to get people to trust the message more. How will I do that? And that's the framework we built and all that kind of thing. But basically, I think people have to see how it's the root cause. So in business, and I've been fortunate to have people say they use this to triple their sales in 90 days. I've had people, the Admiral of the Navy, say it helped them drop suicide rates. I've had people say they gained 11% market share in a year, which is a big Fortune 50 company. I had engagement scores go up. But the one thing they have to see is how trust is the root issue, like how a lack of trust really is their biggest expense. If you think of, I think I said it on stage that day, but think of a simple idea. It's like a lock. Why would I put a lock on anything? Because I don't trust, right? So what's the cost? Well, I got to buy the lock, but the biggest cost is time. Now I got to open it every time I go through the gate. I've got to deal with that. So, and that's the same with people. Like if you're a parent, like I am, of teenagers, and your kids are going out Friday night with friends they trust. Oh, that feels great. They're going out with friends they don't trust. That is the biggest stress you have as a parent. Same in a business. I got a team member, they got my back. I trust them. They're going to deliver on this. I got someone I don't trust. The biggest stress you have at work.
Well, you use this word leading indicator, and that really, I think, taps into my business economic mind. It's like we're always looking for leading indicators, because those are things that we can influence that pay off down the road. You've also talked about trust as a currency of strong relationships. Will you explain that?
Well, in financially, you can think about this. First of all, in a simple form, like a score, your what am I thinking now? If I'm getting a mortgage, your credit score.
Credit score.
Yeah, your credit score. That's really a trust score, right? Uh-huh. You're paying based on the trust. So if people, look at your credit score. Oh, you don't pay on the time. This doesn't happen. So you have to pay more, right? But when you have a high credit score, you have in essence, a high trust score, and you pay less. And that's the same, financially and in everywhere. Jumping back, my mind's going all over here, but the leading indicator thing, we found trust was the leading indicator, not just to time, not just to cost, but it was the leading indicator of productivity. It was the leading indicator of efficiency. It was the leading indicator in schools. It was the leading indicator of classroom management and a host of things. So.
Okay, well, if it's a leading indicator, you're likening it to a measurable, like credit score. So I'm guessing that you have come to believe that trust is measurable. Can you measure trust?
Yes, you can measure trust.
How do you do it?
So in technical terms, we have 6, tools that we use, but they measure against them. So we have an enterprise trust index that competes with engagement survey, or a team trust assessment, self-assessment, all these diagnostics to measure trust and close gaps against the framework. But basically, in my grad work and research, the first half was kind of proving out how a lack of trust is the biggest expense of a company and organization. Some of the things we talked about, a leading indicator. But that begs the question in research. The second half was then, well, if it's so important, how do you actually build it? So is it just integrity like I thought, or character, or whatever I thought a long time ago? Or is it even what there's a lot. Back when I was talking about trust, very few people were talking about trust and leadership in this world. And there's a few bigger names that didn't do as much research around it. But very, very few. now all that's changed, and last 5 years, everybody's been talking about trust with and mostly without research. So you have someone saying, "Well, trust is transparency." Well, that's not true. There's an expert that says that today, and it's not full answer because some of your kids are so transparent on social media. I don't trust them for a second because confidentiality is also trusted.
Right.
So we had to define trust. We had to, come up with a definition. But then in the how part, we had to come. How really is trust built? So in my grad work, that's what started this. Is first of all, in grad work, you do research of research, what's out there, and then you start looking at a model and what actually builds trust. So there's something we call the 8-pillar framework. I know it's a lot. It's like, oh, why do you have to have so many? It's like, well, it came out of the research. Otherwise, I would have had 3 points in a poem. But it's this way. So it's these 8 things that we measure trust against. That was just a couple of years ago revalidated by Social Research Lab out of Northern Colorado. That framework of that is how trust is built. And I believe, without, I hope, ego, but a lot of research, that this is how trust is built globally. It's how trust is built across everything we've worked with, from the New York Yankees to FedEx to Penn State to Delta or whatever. So it's very solid. That doesn't mean we don't contextualize it for a situation or a people group or a part of the world, or if we're trying to increase trust in sales compared to policing issues or corruption issues in East Africa or whatever. So, but we measured all against this 8-pillar framework, and then we had to find, valid questions that would measure those 8 pillars.
Well, I want to talk about that because these 8 pillars come from your book, The Trust Edge. Mm-hmm. And of course, anyone who works in leadership development, culture change, trust is going to be a big thing. Right. And we've noticed, as you probably have, everybody has different definitions of trust. They're personal, they're individualized. And what we have noticed is it all comes down to basically 2 questions. And here's what we've discovered is people either want to have this question answered, am I safe with you? Mm-hmm. Or they want to have this question answered, can I count on you? Mm-hmm. And so, of course, it's not that simple, but we've noticed that people really gravitate to one or the other pretty significantly. So I went and looked at the Trust Edge, looked at your 8 pillars, and what I noticed is that of those 8 pillars, 2 of them clearly speak to the question of, am I safe with you? Compassion and connection. Mm-hmm. 6 of them clearly speak to the issue of, can I count on you? About follow through, integrity, consistency, those kinds of things. So I'm curious, have you seen any differences, individual differences in how trust is experienced, or maybe which of these 8 pillars tend to be more important to some people?
Well, you could say some people, as far as which are more important. First of all, they do start with C's, as you know, but the one caution I would give people, to use another C word, is that they're not kind of this list for a pastor in a sermon, like to make it all C's here. That does make them memorable, but they all represent a very important, research funnel. They're really important, and they were different enough, even though there's overlap. So that's important. So are some more important to certain people or situations? Certainly. So for example, to have what we call the trust edge, or be a trusted leader in the way we define it, you need all 8, right? But I might, want to make sure my pilot has a very high competency pillar. I can trust them for their competency and capability. I might care a little bit less about their compassion pillar, right? How much they care about me. On the other hand, my babysitter of my kids, I might want to make sure they have a high compassion and a high character pillar, mm-hmm. but I may not care quite as much about clarity or competency even of certain ways. So certainly situationally, we might start certain places, and this is why we measure it to close certain gaps, or certain people we might look to having, a higher pillar in a certain way than others. I mean, yeah.
Well, so let's talk about the airline thing. I'm going off script here. So the other day I don't remember what airport I was leaving, can't keep track. And we taxied, and there was no information coming from the pilots, nothing. And we're all beginning to wonder what's going on. Finally, we're thinking we're about to arrive at our destination, but by ground, because we've taxied so long, and we start seeing the same things going by, like kind of a
Sure.
Flintstones,
Yeah.
opening thing. And finally, the pilot comes on and says, well, because of the storms, we're going to have to fly a longer route. So we got to go back to the gate and refuel so that we have enough. I'm thinking, okay, competency. They're following their
Yeah.
whatever. Here's what was lacking though. Never in the whole time did we feel like they cared about our
Yeah.
experience of being in that seat. And I can see now how, yes, we want the competency pillar, but my goodness, if they would have just had a little empathy and said something like, we appreciate, I know it's getting hot and here's why we're doing this. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, whatever. And airlines like maybe Southwest, they get these really high ratings. Maybe that's because they have more of the pillars.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's going to change for Southwest, unfortunately, after 32 years with the changes they're making. But I think, so empathy for us falls under the compassion pillar. You know compassion as well as anyone. And this is a core to trust. We have to feel cared about. So, and by the way, but I wanted to just see how they overlap. So clarity, if they were clear, that's showing care. Showing what's happening. And empathy, I might say, if a pilot would just say, for instance, in that moment, we know trust would go up if they would say something like this. Hey, I bet it's hot back there. I know you have places to go. I know this is how you want to spend a half an hour. We're really sorry this is happening, but the weather is happening there. We want to keep you safe, even over keeping you all happy,
Right.
And so we have to do that. And that would also be clarity too. Like these fit together. I'm being clear about what's happening. I'm being compassionate, and it's hard work to build trust. So each of these pillars, like another pillar is consistency, right? So you could say, let's just take clarity first. We could say, hey, a leader might not be trusted if they're not clear about the vision. A manager might not be trusted if they're not clear about the expectations. A salesperson might not be trusted if they're not clear about the benefits of the product, right? A teacher might not be trusted if they're not clear about the assignment, even if they're really compassionate. So we got to clear. But if I'm not consistent, like if I share the vision today, but I don't share it every 21 days, maybe in this world, they just lost clarity, right? And as I often say, just to get to the leading indicator thing, the piece, it's all this 8 pillars, by the way, are I believe, really core to the issue to solve things. And if people would drill down one more level from what they're thinking to these, they'd actually solve the real thing. So as an example, we say, we got a leadership issue. No, it's one of these. David, you love C words. I bet it's a communication issue. Actually, at the core, it's not. It's communication is happening all the time. Of course, I know what people mean, and I honor that. But it's clear communication, or it's compassionate communication from that pilot, or it's committed, or it's consistent, or it's competent, right? Incompetent. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to throw a couple more C words in here. I love them. So listeners of my podcast or people that know me know that compassionate accountability is kind of our thing. And it's really the strategic practice of building connections and at the same time getting results, not doing one or the other. So, for example, not doing compassion, but at the expense of consistency or clarity.
Right.
And one of the things we notice is these things don't have to be in tension. You don't have to pick one over the other. And we've noticed that and I want to talk about conflict, that's the other C, is that trust and conflict go so close together. And one of the things we're noticing is that conflict is often the bridge between compassion and accountability, both important in trust. And we're starting to wonder which comes first, trust or conflict, or how are they related? And that's something we've been playing with a lot. So I'm curious, what is your view on the relationship between trust and conflict?
Well, I think there's a couple things. One, as we often say, there's poisonous conflict that deteriorates trust, and there's healthy conflict. There's a truth that in conflict you can increase trust faster than almost any other time in the way you deal with it. So that's, by the way, I'm curious about how you deal with this, because as you know, accountability. So we say this all the time, at least when I go into organizations, and I want to ask you your advice here, is accountability. We see a problem of no accountability or poisonous accountability. And we say you can't have a healthy organization without healthy accountability.
Right.
But that's compassionate accountability.
Well, I'm with you because we say compassion without accountability gets you nowhere, and accountability without compassion gets you alienated. And you're not compassionate if you're not doing accountability, but you're also just doing toxic conflict when you don't have compassion mixed in. So I think we're on the same page.
Yes,
and I love what you said about conflict. Trust, when we are in conflict, is this incredible opportunity to build trust or break trust. And it's all in how we do the conflict and whether we're going to do,
Well, and I think another thing about conflict, that's exactly right. So you can build trust faster in crisis than any other time, which kind of is like in conflict. Like when George W. Bush was the most trusted, his scores were the highest, his ratings, the week after 9/11. How he responded to crisis. And that's kind of in a mini way conflict in an office space. Oh, we got this big tension. How I respond in this tough situation when someone threw a clipboard across the boardroom or yelled or whatever. So you just have everything gets sped up, it gets amplified those times. Another thing is it's the type of conflict, because I think I wish I had this, because I hate to give stats without being able to back up exactly where they came from. But I believe I read this right, that 70% of conflict, according to one study, is due to a lack of clarity. So if we had clarity, we wouldn't have that conflict. I'm not positive about that. The other type, of course, of unhealthy conflict is generally, what did I read? It was kind of almost politics, office politic dynamic stuff. Right. There was a different phrase for it, but
we call it drama. We call drama as the misuse of conflict energy to feel justified instead of be effective. But so again, the trust edge is where people can go. Listeners go to learn about the 8 pillars of trust, some really great groundbreaking work. You are a trust researcher too at heart, and you've been I went back and looked, you've been publishing an annual Trust Outlook report since like 17, right? Like 2017?
Well, that's when it went annual. Of course, I did research way before that, back to 05 or earlier, about around 05, 06, 07. And then we did put one out that I don't think we put on the site, but a very significant one in 2014 as well. Okay. We called it Trust Trends back then. But yes, we put an annual study, in the new way under Trust Outlook out. Yeah, starting.
Well, what's new? What are you finding this past year?
Well, I think one thing that's interesting maybe is that trust is more personal than it's been in a long time. So I think with the change of AI and deep fakes and all these kind of things, we want to touch it, feel it, see it, taste it, be in person with it. And so that's one interesting finding, is that institutional trust has tanked. We don't trust government. We don't trust big business. Yep. We don't trust media. We don't trust all these things nearly as much as we used to. I often say, the history of trust in a nutshell is a long, long time ago, we didn't trust for 2 reasons. I didn't know you. You're from that mountain over on that side of the world. Or because I do know you. You're my brother and I saw how you act, right?
I know.
But it was personal, and then it became institutionalized, and that was a good thing, because in institutions things are slower moving. So you could trust the government and have one bad apple, trust the education system and have one bad teacher. But now in the 60s, 70s in America, institutional trust just tanked a load, and so now then we went to distributed trust, of course, blockchain, Uber, and that kind of thing. And there's a big divide that we still trust those, Lyft and that kind of thing. But we also have divided off, like, we want it personal, because we don't know through any media almost can we trust that? We don't know to trust Google reviews. Are they true or not? Are they paid for? So I think that's one takeaway of many for our world, is that trust is going to be more personal. And the more personal you can be, even if it's through some technology, the better and more trusted you'll be.
Thank you for sharing that. And that's probably a good time to mention your new book. And when this, for those of you that are listening to this podcast right when it comes out, you are on launch week of
Yeah.
your new book
Right.
called Trust Matters More Than Ever.
Yep.
There it is. You got some advanced copies
I got an
already?
advanced copy. I'll tell you, I'm so proud of this. It's pre-sold more copies than all my other ones did. It still has the 8 pillars. It comes to do as a quick review, and then it gives 40 tools. And these are the tools that our certifieds pay thousands of dollars to use and apply. And we just put it all in one book. We felt like we had to do it. 40 proven tools to lead better, grow faster, and build trust now. And it's just so actionable. And you can see this. I know some of your people will be listening, but the beauty and just cool factor of this book, it's unlike any other business book you'll see. The new, I wonder if I can show it here if people are watching it all, but the counterforces wheel, like you can use, it's just really beautifully usable and tactical. So easy for the reader or non-reader to act on. So it's those tools all come under the 8-pillar framework.
Wow. So this is a culmination of all of your work, all of your research. You're sharing the latest, greatest, and doing something else that I don't know if this is a trust thing or not, but I'm really partial to books that are practical, pragmatic. A little bit of theory and research is great, but really the credibility comes in is, can I use it? Does it work? Does it make sense for me? And it sounds like that's really where you're bringing this.
This one is really practical. We said people don't want, our publisher even said that people don't want to read much anymore. And it's all of us. It's so cool. It's cool to touch. It's got a ribbon in it and everything. And people that know us, our brand, it's trusted. So everything they touch around here has to feel beautiful and expensive, even if they pay less. So it's hardcover like all the other books, but it's differently made. If you touch the embossing, it's kind of really cool too. So,
I hear you.
I hear you.
And go ahead.
But it's also really usable. There's not many. It's got like the tools are all listed for each section, and it's got an index in the back. Funny enough, that says, something you talked about. We have conflicts getting in the way of our work. Page 87, the pause conflict model. We don't know how to accomplish our goals. Page 66, the number 9, 90-day quick plan. Our culture is deteriorating. 10-step process for organizations of character, or our model for giving feedback, or our 6-step accountability framework, which isn't probably aligns with a lot of what you're doing. 10 steps to rebuild trust if you've ever broken trust, which many of us
practical.
have.
So practical. And to be able to find the things you want based on what am I facing right now.
Yep.
Well, there's something else that happens in November.
There is.
And we are in an election year. And my guess is if somebody listens to this podcast a year from now, we're still going to be talking politics. So I'm curious, do you have any comments, observations? What's going on with trust right now during this? What are you seeing?
Well, I don't, some of the listeners might not know, but one of the boards I serve on is Citizens for the American Majority. And that is, I'm the only non-governor or House or senator that is, invited to be on that. And I fly to DC at least 5 times a year for that, bring together Republicans and Democrats. Number one, I would say there's some hope, and that is, believe it or not, there are Republicans and Democrats that want to work together. The problem is they aren't the ones you see on Fox or MSNBC that are trying to get their face on or be extreme. They're trying and wanting to work together. So that's one thing. Number two, there's some significant challenges of how our government and country has de-incentivized trust. And so, 100 years ago, a Republican and Democrat senator from California would duke it out on the floor and then get on a train and eat every night together back to California. They never touch or see each other today. In fact, in the Capitol, there's a deli for Republicans and a deli for Democrats. In January, when the new House members come in, I couldn't believe this, but you'll go for this orientation, and then the lady that in this case I'm thinking of said, "Okay, Republicans, you guys go ahead and get on the red bus and go back to your hotel. The Democrats get on the blue bus, go back to your hotel." Like, they don't even sit together. Talk. I mean, it's just like they need. There's de-incentivization of humanizing, of just seeing each other as human. That's a big problem.
And that's at the same time that you're saying that trust is becoming more personal than ever.
Right. Huge problem. There's a load of problems I could talk about from kind of an inside perspective. I think if you take, this can get to be a political battle, which they shouldn't all be, but term limits are a problem, I think, in some ways. I mean, I think that de-incentivizes building trust to get the right thing done now. For example, right now, one of the big problems is Social Security, which, even though people from the outside say, well, we can just go in greater and greater and greater debt. I don't even get it. We're 35 trillion in debt. The truth is it will run out. It does have an endpoint, and there is a big problem there. And people know that in the House, and they won't do it because they will not get voted on next term. So there's selfishness is the problem. There's clarity. I could go through the pillars. Yeah. Clarity. I mean, I think about 80 years ago, the average bill that went through Congress was something like 2.5 pages. People understood it. Today, it's over 1,500 pages per bill. None of those, they have not read the whole bill. They don't even understand what's in it. So they're voting for things they don't understand. So you got there you go. How many, you want 50 That's more good. Ideas?
No.
But another thing is the amplification of fundraising, the need for fundraising. That freshman senator that comes in, believe it or not, some of your U.S. senators are sleeping on the floor of their office space to save money and to build, to fundraise from day one. It's crazy what's happening. They either are at the House or they're fundraising instead of ever connecting or building relationship across the aisle. So there's a load of other challenges. I'm proud of the work that Cam is doing. No labels. There's some other people that are trying to bring people together. They're getting people have lots of things to say about those, but I look for places where we're trying to do what's right and bring people together. And by the way, I have hope because I've seen it happen. I remember in kind of a little bit of a front row seat. I can't take any credit for this, but I got to speak there several times and work with Kenya when Kenyatta, President Kenyatta and opposition Raila Odinga came together. I mean, nobody thought they would ever shake hands or come together. It happens, and it can happen, and we need it to happen, and we need to do what we can as Americans to bring people together. If you're from here,
well, I can tell how much. Excuse me, that's not in my throat. I appreciate not only how much you care, but also that you're in there in the trenches offering these tips and being a resource. Glad you're there because we need it. So we could go in a lot of different directions here, but I'm curious as we kind of try to land this thing, is there anything that's kind of on your heart, on your mind right now that you want people to know and appreciate and understand about trust?
Well, I'm as passionate about this work as I ever have been. On one way you could say, well, I saw the research. On another way you could say, well, I saw the admirals say we're dropping suicide rates here, or we tripled sales here, or we increase engagement scores there. And of course, those amplify your belief in something when you see something work, right? When you see it do these things. But I saw it change me. It's changed me as a leader, as a dad, and I've seen it change frontline people to me. And so I'm passionate about this. I'm as passionate as I've ever been. People say, David, when are you going to talk about something else? When are you going to research something else? I mean, you talk about trust forever, like never. Like I don't see, it's just, I'm so into this now. There's always new to it. I'm unlike some in this, in the learning development space that that are speaking about the same thing they were 20 years ago, but they're saying the same things they were 20 years ago too. They're not fresh and that kind of thing. So I'm as passionate about this as ever. Maybe if I was going to push people about something, I'll let you. It looked like you were going to ask another question. I have two other thoughts.
It's so great. It's so great. As you're talking, I'm just thinking, often we'll ask people, so what does it take for you to trust someone? And invariably, people will only describe behaviors or qualities of someone else. They never talk about themselves. They never talk about, well, here's what I would need to do or how I would need to be to trust someone or to be trustworthy. It's always trust is something someone else has to do for me.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, what's your view on that? Because you just said trust starts, it changes me. I'm the one that changed.
Yes. Well, I don't know. This is pretty interesting. I was speaking not too long ago at an event, and this has happened multiple times, but I'm thinking about this event in Vegas with a couple thousand people, and it's a pretty big event. I was, keynote with Serena Williams and, some other big name. And I was in the back afterwards and people are buying books and sometimes they have me sign books. So I stand there and I'm happy to meet people and whatever. And I started not being able to believe how many people were saying to me, oh, can you sign this book to that person? They really need it. Can you sign it to my spouse?
Yeah,
Can you sign it to my boss? Can you sign it to my whatever? Which is what you're saying is like nobody needed it themselves. They all thought of somebody else that needed this trust stuff. So second point number 2 is people often ask me, David, you believe in this. You help people try to be the most trusted in their industry or the most trusted government or the trust or whatever. Is it better to be trusted or trustworthy? And of course, the problem with this framework is the 8-pillar framework is you can appear trusted. You can manipulate these pillars to look at for a little while and not actually be worthy of it. So what we're actually going for at the end of the day is trustworthiness as a company, as a country, as a family. That's what we're actually going for. Better to be actually authentically trusted, which is trustworthy. You asked me what I'm thinking about right now, right today. And it comes under the competency pillar, but is the idea that and I know, but it's in business, we say input equals output. In farming, you say you reap what you sow. In theology, you reap what you sow. I think in first law of thermodynamics, second law of thermodynamics, energy in, energy out, all these things. But there's such a truth to that. And I bring it back to us and you as a president of a learning and development organization. This is why learning and development matters. I wasn't trying to do this. I'm not trying to pander in our space or anything. I'm just saying input really does equal output. Giving, we need to train, we need to equip, we need to give people the right thinking. My kids, my family, my life, it's like if I put the right things in my mind, I get different things out of it. I put certain things in my, I give certain things to my marriage, I get certain things out of it. I put certain things in my body. I'm a guy that lost 52 pounds in 5 months in 2011 and has kept it mostly off. So I know what it's like to put different things in my body and not, So whether it's in my body, my family, my company, or my team, and I'm surprised at people that continually want different output and they're not putting different input in. And that's one thing I'm thinking a lot. What are the inputs that help build the right output? And that's, one of the pillars. It comes under one of the pillars of trust because we're trusted for what we put in and what we get out,
David Horsager, talking about trust, about be focused less on being trusted and more about being worthy of trust, being trustworthy, and that what you put in, the inputs equal the outputs. Wow. Amazing. So if people want to learn more about your books, about the work that you do, how to hire you, and how to buy books for themselves, maybe?
Yeah. Hey.
But you can buy it for your friends also. How can we learn more? How should we connect with you?
TrustEdge.com is a good spot. www.trustedge.com. Of course, my name, David Horsager, if you can spell it. And then, the new book is Trust Matters More Than Ever. And it's just really, I'm super excited about the impact of this work. But of course, we have all the other ways. Research is free and available at trustedge.com. We don't take sponsorship for that because we don't want to be the chocolate company that says eat 10 pounds a day, right?
Yeah.
But trustedge.com. And of course, I'm all over, other places, LinkedIn and stuff, but just come there and you can find everything. And
we'll put those links in
the friendship, Nate.
Yeah, you're welcome. And we'll put those in the show notes, all of the stuff we've talked about. David, thank you so much for your enthusiasm, for sharing your time with us. I know you're super busy, for the difference you're making in the world, and for the way that you're bringing your research into a practical way that we can use it every day, starting with ourselves. Go out and get the new book, Trust Matters More Than Ever. David, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Compassionate Accountability Podcast. What struck you? What can you take and use today? I'd love to hear from you. And if you haven't already, pick up a copy of my new book, Compassionate Accountability: How Leaders Build Connection and Get Results. If you've already read the book, I'd appreciate your review on Amazon. Contact us today to learn more about how Next Element helps companies transform their cultures with compassionate accountability. And remember, embracing both compassion and accountability is the secret to great leadership and the roadmap for thriving cultures and strong brands.